The art of the Uncharted Trilogy mostly contains finalized concept art, but it also has a fair amount of iteration art. The focus is mostly on the characters and environments, and there's artist commentary about design decisions on almost every page. Overall, it's a good video game art book. This review will cover the quality of the physical book itself, the content of the book, the aesthetics, and the nostalgia evoked by the book. I'll also talk about how it provides insight into the development of the games. Let's start with the quality of the physical book. It's 9 inches by 12 inches. It has 189 pages. The cover and pages are of average quality, as is the printing quality. So overall, I'd say the quality of the physical book is about average. Alright, what's inside this book? Well, there are rough concept sketches, finalized concept art, some storyboard-like sequences. There's also a few other things like action poses that they use to get the right feel for the environments. And though there's some of everything, the book mostly has finalized concept art, and most of that is about the environments, which I like in this case. The book's organized by game and starts with Uncharted 1, and within each game there's characters and environments, which are in chronological order. Uncharted 1 and Uncharted 3 both have small sections on unused ideas, and Uncharted 2 has a small section on Drake's journal. So overall, I like how everything's organized in the same way that players experience the games. Is there any writing from the artists or developers themselves? Well, as near as I can tell, all of it's from them. Here's some examples of the types of things that they write about. They mention that they draw facial expressions for all the characters, and that helps them shape the personality of the characters. They also write about how they discovered that they shouldn't use horizontal designs on the ruins and stones because it's too difficult for the player to tell where you're able to climb and where you aren't. Now, something I've always thought was problematic in the Uncharted games is that you'll go into some ancient ruin where no one's been for thousands of years, and there's these lit torches everywhere. Well, the developers just straight up say that lighting in a cave or wherever is very difficult, and they wanted some way to do it without just using flashlights every time. They originally conceived of the final city in Uncharted 3 being underground, but figuring out the lighting was just too difficult. So, with things like that, I really like the developer commentary. They're to the point, they add context to what you're seeing, helps you understand the design process better. And so it's pretty much my ideal kind of writing for a video game art book. Alright, does this book have what you want it to have? Well, I think that one of the main highlights of the Uncharted games, and what I wanted to be in the book, are the environments. And this book really focuses on them, which is great. A lot of books like this would take maybe 10 or more pages and show you all the different weapons that were designed for each game, and all the minor variations that led to the final versions. That makes sense for certain games, but I thought they made the right decision not to do that with this book because the weapons aren't really the main attraction in the Uncharted series. That said, this book isn't really a comprehensive tome on the games. For example, while there's a few images of puzzles, each puzzle in the games isn't featured in this book. I would like to see such a thing, but that's not what this book is. I think 189 pages for the first 3 Uncharted games is a bit too few. Ideally, there would be a lot more content overall. They could likely make a book this thick for each of the 3 games. Well, even though the quantity isn't quite what I'd like, I think the quality of the book's contents is pretty good. On to the aesthetics. As with many video game art books, the art in this book would have benefited from being in a wide format book rather than a tall one. With this book in particular, it's all the more pronounced because most of the concept art is wide rather than tall. They found a way to put it all in, but I think it would have made more sense just to put them in a wide book. That said, I think the overall layout's pretty consistent, and there's no aesthetic barriers, so it's pretty average in this regard. Are there any full pages of art? Well, not as many as I would have hoped since so many images are wide, but there are some nice full-page images. And I do think the quality of the art itself is probably above average. Is there anything else noteworthy about the book's aesthetics? Although the cover seems to be made of normal cardboard like any other book, The design of it is so convincing that it really looks like it's made of leather. The debossed text and compass just adds to that. I also think the red gilded page edges are pretty cool. It helps give the book a unique look overall. It just feels like a fancy book. Now, this is a specific edition of the book that looks like this. I can't comment on the appearance of the normal one. Well, though the overall aesthetics could have been better, I think they're pretty good. As for the nostalgia evoked by the book, I think the games are so well designed and deliberate that they lend themselves to nostalgia naturally. And seeing these images brings me right back to the feeling of playing the games. I don't know that it makes me want to play them again, because it's more explaining how and why they made the design choices that they did. We don't really get a deep dive into any of the memorable moments. So I'd say the book does as good a job as any other at evoking nostalgia. Alright, what does this book reveal about the game's development? I thought there were a lot of interesting comments that provided insight into the art designs, and that gave me an increased appreciation for what it took to make these games. Here are some examples of the types of things I found interesting. I found it interesting that they struggled to create an everyman look for Drake since it goes against their normal design philosophy of creating something stylized and recognizable. There were also a few examples of how art design and game design intersect. For example, you're probably aware that lighting and colored paint is used in the Uncharted games to help you know where to go, but the artists also create more subtle things like unique ruins that tend to attract your attention, and also things like smoke or flapping flags. They also discussed how they designed some characters in a way that would be easier to animate them while they were riding a horse, so they had to design the characters around that technical limitation. I also thought it was interesting that the artist put Drake and the other characters into the environments so that it kind of helped convey the overall feeling of the locale that they were going for. The developers also comment on some other aspects of art design, such as how they use sharper lines and edges with Chloe's clothing as opposed to Elena's, in order to reflect the differences in their personalities. One other thing that I found pretty interesting: the foreword speaks to the rough conditions of working on a realistic looking game rather than a cartoony one, having the founders of the company leave, and of working with a new and basically unfinished platform, the PlayStation 3. I found it interesting to see how they discovered that they needed a more traditional, top down company organization to deal with all this, rather than the flat organization they were used to. They just needed increased organization to get everything to flow better. This might also explain why Valve hasn't made a real game in almost a decade. Well, if you're an Uncharted fan, then this is pretty much your only option for art from the first 3 games. But I think it's a pretty good option. Different people want different things in video game art books, but I hope this review has been helpful in showing you what you can expect from this book. If you have any complaints, please don't hesitate to contact my customer support center.